You're listening to Mix 1049's 360. Now, this week is set to be a busy one with Parliament sitting for the first time for 2025. Some legislation set to be passed and also introduced around the scrapping of the floor price and big changes when it comes to corrections. The Chief Minister also set to deliver her year ahead speech this morning, so she spoke to me a little bit earlier. Chief Minister, good morning to you.
Good morning, Katie, and to your listeners.
Now, you are set to deliver your year ahead speech this morning. You're on your way there. What are you hoping that 2025 is going to bring for Territorians?
Well, 2025 is shaping up to be a great year, Katie, and we want the year to be framed around three key things: action, certainty, and security for Territorians. So we're really looking forward to a bumper year, starting with tomorrow in Parliament, where we have a wide range of legislation ready to go. It's a big year of reform, but we've got to get this right in order to put the Territory on her best foot forward, and that is what we're determined to do.
So talk me through some of that legislation and what you think really needs to kick off very quickly in order to try and get the Northern Territory to prosper.
Well, we know that our debt is at eye-watering levels, Katie. We're set to hit the $15 billion debt ceiling, and, this is a legacy we've inherited from Labor. So we have to grow our economy if we're going to give Territorians every opportunity to have the services that they expect and deserve, and of course, and the opportunities for themselves and for their kids. So kicking off this week, we'll have Territory Coordinator legislation introduced into the Parliament. Our payroll tax reforms should be passed during the Parliament tomorrow. We're also going to be introducing a removal of the debt ceiling. We've got our merits review, which is a big new announcement from today, Katie, where third-party merits review will be scrapped from the petroleum, water and planning legislation. So there's lots going on and there's no time to lose. We've got to put our best foot forward, including continuing to keep the pressure on law and order. And I've also got legislation this week to give police better powers about entry into premises. I
do just want to ask, in terms of the third-party merits review and also the changes and the legislation there around the Territory Coordinator, there is no doubt you're going to get some pushback from those, on the more green side of the fence, I guess, or those that are really quite worried about the environment. I mean, what do you say to those people that are listening this morning that have got concerns that this is going to mean that that there could be projects going through here in the NT that are maybe going to damage the environment?
It's a great question. I'm glad you asked, because what third-party merits review is it gives people who have no actual connection to a project the opportunity to slow it down through the courts. Now, that doesn't protect the environment. It's not a type of regulation that ensures that we've got the right safeguards in place. All it does is give people with no connection at all the opportunity to engage in lawfare and, protract the length of project time. So what this doesn't do is, it still protects people who do have a connection to the project, so they still have all of their review options, and of course it still maintains judicial review. But this is about giving certainty to investors that there's just not going to be this continued obfuscation of projects, because we need them now more than ever.
Chief Minister, there is no doubt that for the Northern Territory to prosper, we need to see some serious changes when it comes to the issues of crime. Now, early yesterday, we learned a woman had been killed in Alice Springs. A 39-year-old man is in custody. Some media reporting this is another horrific domestic violence incident. Is that your understanding?
Oh, I've seen the reporting as well, Katie, and I know that police have apprehended the alleged offender, and so more details I'm sure will come to light over the coming days. But it's horrific, Katie, and this year alone we're set to spend $36 million on prevention of family and domestic violence. We know it's a major issue right across the Northern Territory. But, so is alcohol-fueled harm and a range of other things that are a big part of our plan for this year. This week we will be scrapping the minimum floor price. This year we will be doing our consultation on what our mandatory alcohol treatment will look like going forward, and review the banned drinker register. So there's plenty of work to be done. The Territory's unquestionably in bad shape, Katie, but there is a way forward, and that's why we've got to stay the course and get it done.
When do you anticipate that we are really going to see that domestic violence funding sort of hit the ground and mean some genuine change in this space?
Well, it's certainly, we're obviously expending a lot of money right now, but that $36 million kicks in after, when the budget happens in May. And we hope it makes a huge impact. Of course, this is about personal responsibility above anything else. Governments can throw tens of millions of dollars supporting women and children with safe places to live. We can pay NGOs to deliver behavioural change programs. But at the end of the day, this is about people, particularly men, standing up and being responsible for their behaviour and how they treat people. So we'll throw everything at it, Katie, and we certainly hope that makes a big impact on the numbers.
Chief Minister, over the weekend we also learned the horrific news that a 5-year-old boy was allegedly raped in a remote Northern Territory community last week. It's triggered calls for greater public disclosure of child sexual abuse. Now, multiple sources have confirmed to the Australian newspaper that a 19-year-old male was arrested and charged following the alleged rape, which occurred in a small community in the northern part of the Territory near the Gulf of Carpentaria, is my understanding, on Tuesday last week. Now, the 19-year-old is set to face the Darwin local court today, charged with sexual intercourse of a child under the age of 10. Chief Minister, it is utterly horrendous. The news broke just hours after the Prime Minister was in Alice Springs making the announcement with you. When were you made aware of this?
Oh, it is absolutely abhorrent, Katie. I was probably made aware, I would say within about 24 hours, possibly, Katie. I'd have to go back and check that. Yeah. But I just want, there's absolute need for transparency in police reporting, and I'll be the first person to advocate for that. It's just from time to time, police have to be very careful, because the last thing we ever want to do is to do anything that would jeopardise a conviction. And so it took the police a couple of days to put that out into the media, but that's because they're treading very, very carefully to make sure nothing jeopardises our opportunity to deliver justice for victims. And that's a really important test that police have to undertake every single time a crime happens before they put it out into the public.
Chief Minister, we know today the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he's going to be delivering his closing the gap speech in Canberra. The same time, we've got this report by Liam Mendes that this case has led child safety advocates to call for more information to be made public about serious sexual assaults on children to increase awareness of widespread child abuse in the Northern Territory. I mean, I'm merging a couple of issues here, but we're talking about closing the gap, yet we every single week just about, I'm reporting on terrible rates of domestic violence in the Northern Territory, reporting on this horrendous sexual assault of a child under the age of 5 years old. I mean, it's appalling that this kind of thing is still happening in the Northern Territory.
Oh, it is appalling, Katie. There's no sugarcoating this stuff. It's absolutely abhorrent. And that's why a stronger focus on law and order is required. I know out of the funding we received from the federal government that we announced last week, a big portion of that is for remote policing, which is incredibly helpful for the Territory. But that's why we walk into Parliament every sitting, Katie, and we're giving police better powers. That's why we're trying to build prisons faster than you can blink. Yeah. We've got to be putting law and order first, and for so long, for nearly a decade, the rights of people doing the wrong thing have been put above people's right to be safe. It's just so wrong. That's why we're here, Katie, and we've got to take all of the actions we can from a legislative, from a policy perspective, from making sure our justice system is strong to make sure that we're protecting particularly our most vulnerable, our children.
I mean, at the same time, though, you've got these discussions about closing the gap and these discussions about the high incarceration rate of Indigenous people. I mean, what do you make of that?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of focus on closing the gap, and of course that's important. And I think some people then point to incarceration numbers and sort of draw the two together. I think the reality is the law is the law, and people who do the wrong thing end up in front of the justice system. That's how it works. Now, yes, unfortunately, Aboriginal people are well and truly overrepresented in our crime data, in people in prison. But at the end of the day, what we need is strong communities. We need people not to break the law. And that's also why this year, Katie, part of our plan is to do the consultation on what can future local community government look like. The super shires have disempowered people living in the bush. They've completely failed to create economic growth and opportunities for Aboriginal people. So this, again, is something we have to tackle so that we can deal with those root causes of crime. And a big part of that is also getting kids to school at all costs. And our 47 school attendance officers are really helping go part of the way there to make sure we are absolutely focused on supporting young people above everything else.
All right, Chief Minister, I know you are pressed for time, but I want to ask you, last week, of course, your government shocked correctional staff across the Northern Territory, announcing contractors are going to be used in a number of roles across the Northern Territory corrections system. Now, when Parliament resumes this week, I know the government's set to introduce this targeted amendments to the Correctional Services Act. It is subject to passage through the Legislative Assembly, but the Commissioner of Corrections spoke to us on the show on Friday. He's going to have the power to appoint special officers to supplement the core corrections workforce. Now, these changes are going to include the secondment of interstate officers and the appointment of specialist officers. Correctional officers have raised serious concerns about these changes. They are telling me that this is the first step, they believe, in privatising corrections, and they worry that the appointment of these special officers is going to mean private security are effectively dealing with some of the Territory's worst criminals. Chief Minister, why are these changes to corrections happening?
They're happening because we've got our corrections officers currently spending 168,000 hours every year moving prisoners back and forward from court to the watch house to the prison and to hospital. I mean, it's an unbelievable waste of time, and it's contributing to around $11 million in overtime costs. So that means our corrections officers aren't getting the rest they need. They're not spending time at home with their families because they're being called back on overtime to escort prisoners to hospital, for example, sit there for 4, 10 hours, 2 days, whatever it takes, drive them back. Every day we have police and corrections shuttling people to and from watch houses and courts backwards and forwards, up and down from Darwin and Palmerston every day. And it is a total waste of their time. So by being able to bring in highly trained professionals to do those services, we're going to free up literally hundreds of thousands of hours of correctional officers to be able to focus on their core job, which is inside prisons. And of course, that means we also have a much bigger opportunity to deliver the rehabilitation that we've committed to focusing on, because corrections, the actual word is to correct. Correcting behaviour is what our hardworking prison officers do, not ferry people around like a taxi service.
Chief Minister, can you guarantee that you aren't going to privatise corrections?
Absolutely, Katie. We have no interest in doing that. What we're interested in is dealing with our crisis. And, the unions can't have it both ways, Katie. They're screaming out saying the corrections staff are overworked and doing too much overtime. This is an absolute solution to that, and they don't like that solution either. I mean, it doesn't pass the reasonableness test. The everyday Territorian thinks, yep, this is a solution to a big problem, and that's what we're going to do.
Chief, I have spoken to numerous corrections officers. Some have said to me, Katie, I feel like Leah's been doing a great job despite how overcrowded things are. We've agreed to the moves that she's been making, but they feel like this is a kick in the face. They're worried about safety, and they're worried that they're going to be left to clean up the mess when things fall apart. What do you say to those officers who are feeling like you've let them down?
I think change can sometimes be hard, but this is not a new thing, Katie. This happens in other jurisdictions, and it even happens here. For example, in our Supreme Court, we have the sheriff, and the sheriff staff are the ones who look after prisoners in the cells at the Supreme Court. Now, it's just a habitual thing the Territory's done, is to have police and corrections officers do these transfers, but it's certainly not the only way this can be done. So we're not breaking the mould here. This is not a brand new thing that's happening. And ultimately, it's going to give our corrections officers the time they need actually working inside our correctional facilities instead of sitting in the car driving between Darwin and Palmerston and Royal Darwin Hospital every day. So we hear you. This is going to make their life safer, better, easier, and provide that really important respite that they need.
All right, Chief Minister, just quickly, the Prime Minister last week, obviously in Alice Springs with you, announcing $842.6 million over 6 years. It's set to deliver the Northern Territory remote Aboriginal investment, which includes continuation of essential services for remote communities, including policing, women's safety, education and alcohol harm reduction. How is this money going to roll out in a practical way for Territorians to see?
Well, that's the detail we've got to go through now, Katie. We certainly welcome the announcement. This is a lot of money coming into the Territory, and it's for really essential services. We're talking about health services out in the bush. There's about $200 million of that allocated for remote policing, for example. And so now our job is to make sure, as best as we can as a territory, that the federal government are spending that money well. We know in the past we've called for audits of federal spending, and we always get worried about a lack of KPIs around, outcomes. It's actually delivering outcomes. But we really welcome the news. We welcome the Prime Minister into Alice Springs, and we're looking forward to this money hitting the ground where it needs to go.
All right, just a very quick one, Chief Minister. From out in your electorate, we've had a few questions come through last week, in fact, about there being a lot of rubbish around the place in Palmerston. Now, Occy got in contact with us. He'd actually sent us through some photos of rubbish sort of all around the place. One of the very highly visible spots is near Gateway Shopping Centre there. He's saying we need visible policing and what is being done about the homeless people or the people that are out in that area just leaving mess everywhere.
Yeah, we have had quite a number of complaints as local members about things happening in Palmerston, and a meeting was pulled together early last week amongst the local members and police and a range of key stakeholders. So this is something we continue to work on. Obviously, our police numbers aren't where they need to be, and our police powers aren't where they need to be either, which is why we just continue to bring those into the Parliament. But it's about all government services working together and the NGOs, and also the council has an important role to play. So I appreciate everyone sending through the feedback. It's really important, and as local members, it's exactly the type of on-the-ground information we need to be able to take action.
Chief Minister Lingiari Finocchiaro, we'll let you go. I know you've got to get in to deliver that speech. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you, Katie. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.